Hey y'all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a look at the Moto Watch 40. This is a relatively entry-level fitness tracker slash light smartwatch, going for roughly $65. And design-wise, it sits at the intersection of something smaller, like a fitness tracker such as a Mi Band or a Amazfit Band, compared to the more traditional kind of wider aspect ratio of square displays you find in most other smartwatches, really sitting in the middle as far as form factor is concerned. And as a result, it is quite lightweight and comfortable. In fact, I would say the ergonomics as well as the aesthetics arguably are probably the best attributes of this watch. It has a zinc alloy frame, giving it a slightly more premium feel and touch as you are wearing it, as well as the band here coming with a slightly more interesting texture and pattern to it. However, make no mistake, aside from the slightly cooler design, it still is a very entry-level wearable. In fact, I would argue that if you're looking purely at the specs, it may not be the best value on the market, because I actually think the latest generation Xiaomi Mi Band or even the Amazfit Band might be a slightly smarter buy, just because Motorola went with a 1.57-inch IPS LCD screen instead of a OLED display or AMOLED like we see on a lot of those other competitors. That said, it's not a bad screen, it's just you won't find an always-on display mode, for instance. And similarly, features are also going to be very basic. We have the essentials, including step tracking, 24/7 heart rate monitoring, in addition to SpO2 blood oxygen monitoring, and as well as sleep tracking at night. You won't find additional functions such as more apps that you can download, for instance, because it's not running on Android Wear, like on some of the more premium Motorola branded wearables or even some of their earlier devices, ironically enough. And briefly exploring their product page, it's actually quite interesting because it looks like the regular Motorola.com, but it is actually MotoWatch.com, and their homepage is touting 3 new watch releases in the past month or so, including this Watch 40, which is their most budget option, the most narrow display. There's also a slightly middle-of-the-road Watch 70, having a more conventional square shape for the screen, a little bit larger, and also a round screen, which is going to be the Moto Watch 120. But all 3 of these are kind of more like fitness trackers with a larger display. Features are all going to be comparable and running on a similar OS, but one benefit is going to be longer battery endurance, lasting upwards of 10 days before you have to recharge it again, if you're okay with just basic notifications as well as fitness tracking more than anything else. What you won't find on here, for instance, would be built-in GPS, but it has connected GPS, relying on your phone's chip instead to track your route information, and this will instead be just collecting your steps as well as heart rate data throughout your activity sessions. It comes in 2 colors as well, including black as well as rose gold. So again, I think the design and aesthetics from afar are probably the best attributes of this, again representing their most entry-level model here in late 2024. A couple other specs include IP67 water resistance rating, so for sweating as well as if it's raining outside, it will survive, but if you are dunking it into a pool, for instance, deeper depth, it's not going to fare as well as a 5 ATM rating. So it's another area where they cut on some of the costs. It is using 18mm standard watch straps though, and I guess at the very least one good attribute here is it works with both iOS and Android devices, plus for Android you can export your data using Google Fit, so you can save it to your Google account instead of only relying on their third-party app. This model though is also lacking a microphone or speaker, so you can't really answer calls, which are also functions that we are seeing progressively more and more in the $50 to $60 budget range. So again, I do think you're paying a little bit more here for the styling as well as arguably the Motorola name. But if you're attracted to that brand name, I just want to point out that interestingly enough, if we dig a little deeper on their website, again motowatch.com, you'll see that it's technically being licensed out to another manufacturer called CE Brands Inc., which is interestingly enough based in Canada. So no, this is actually no longer manufactured by the OG Motorola as we know it. Even their phone division, of course, is these days licensed by Lenovo. But this is not a product made by Lenovo, but rather another third-party brand. Kind of like how HMD Global is currently licensing the Nokia name, since Nokia has officially themselves quit the smartphone space. It is kind of sad because when we look back at the original wearable from Motorola, released in 2014, the first generation Moto 360 still has a super cutting-edge design almost 10 years later, and it was one of the first ever Android Wear powered smartwatches. It was bleeding edge back then, and it just seems like comparatively we've lost a lot of that ambition because of the licensing to smaller companies essentially making these products just don't have that much R&D, or if they're trying to play off of nostalgia and just use the brand name as opposed to driving innovation by furthering the brand's legacy. privacy, so it's a little bit disappointing in that regard, and also a fair warning before you jump on in, just to dig a little bit deeper at some of those details. So just be cautious that although some of these products may be branded by some of those iconic names of yesteryear, many of them might be just licensing the brand name. Regardless, if you are kind of a Motorola fan, still to this day, it might be an interesting option that you want to consider. Now, a closer look at the build, probably the strongest attribute here, it is really lightweight and comfortable for wearing at the very least, and also houses a power key on the side that you can click on once to turn the screen on as well as off. And interestingly enough, the actual glass here has 2.5D curves, so it's slightly slanted here on the left and the right edges, making swipes feel a little bit smoother, even though the actual screen underneath is a flat panel. And then on the rear here, we have the SpO2, heart rate, as well as the charging contacts, and also the removable watch straps, which at least has one benefit compared to a lot of other, again, fitness bands or fitness trackers back in the day, which sometimes didn't give you with any removable options. And other quick packaging contents here are just inclusive of a user guide as well as a pogo contact for charging up the smartwatch. Quick look at the UI, we can swipe down to access some quick shortcuts, including a do not disturb, night mode, as well as changing the screen brightness. And to their credit, for a LCD screen, it's not bad. You can still mostly make it out even if there's a bit of light hitting on it. You can also turn on and off the raise to wake functionality, and there's also going to be quick settings that you can jump into for changing properties like the language, in addition to the screen timeout duration. And I also think that the UI style, at the very least, with some of these blue icons, are reminiscent of kind of newer versions of Android, as well as the Motorola launcher on top of it, so at least it is relatively consistent and in line with their current design language used by Lenovo on their phones. So it doesn't feel too disjoint, even though it's technically manufactured by a different partner here. And you can also change the menu style between a list as well as a grid layout. So if we tap on grid, for instance, and we jump back again, if we swipe over here to the left to access the full list of applications, you can see it's going to show icons, versus the list method might be a little bit easier to understand since it gives you the text here on the side for also knowing what they represent. We can also long hold for a couple of seconds to switch the watch dial. There's a couple of options that comes pre-included and all kind of take advantage of the Motorola branding, and it doesn't look bad. You can choose between analog or digital styles and change between 12 and 24-hour formats under advanced settings as well. This one here also shows your current temperature status. And the watch does have a vibration motor built on in, so it will buzz to give you alerts if you get a new text or message coming in from social media that you can also check out by swiping up. Although, again, there is no built-in mic, so there's no way to really reply back to those messages. It's just giving you a quick status at a glance if you're paired to your phone using Bluetooth. Here's another one that's a little bit more fancy, giving you also some of your sports activities at a glance, including steps, average heart rate as well, in addition to battery status, still with that Motorola logo. Here's another analog one with a couple more information being displayed at a glance that I think also looks relatively attractive. So at the very least, again, the UI as well as the styling, including the curved glass as well as the use of metal alloy and the interesting band or strap design, are all areas where stylistically I think it's a little bit better than some of the other generic smart bands on the market. That being said, features are quite light, so I think it would have been perhaps more beneficial if they tried to price this thing at under $50 to make it more competitive, but perhaps that's something that we'll see in the holiday shopping season. Only time will tell. Now we can swipe left and right through the carousel of additional widgets, so this allows us to see our daily activity status. You can scroll down to check out a little bit more status at a glance, including when we were more active, calories burned, and distance converted. Accuracy of the pedometer is not bad. It was relatively in line with what I saw on Amazfit and the Xiaomi Mi Band that I was comparing it with earlier. And similarly, the heart rate monitoring function also provided reasonable enough results, which weren't too far off, although the SpO2 sensor is a little bit slower and sometimes requires around 15 to 20 seconds of you being a little bit more still to get a accurate measurement. Now, in terms of sleep tracking, this is also one area where I do think Motorola could do some improvements, just because it only works at the regular nighttime hours. It doesn't have true 24/7 sleep tracking like on some of the aforementioned Amazfit and latest gen Xiaomi Mi Bands. So if you're taking a nap, for example, at noon, it's not going to detect that as sleep automatically, which is a little unfortunate. But again, if you're sleeping at night, I found the numbers to be also not too far off from the competitors. There's also kind of a breathing or calming you down function where you're able to kind of breathe in and breathe out with the expanding and contracting circle, as well as the haptic vibrations, kind of a meditation function that we have also seen on other wearables as well. But you can change the speed as well as the duration, and you can also control music using it as a remote functionality, again, if you're paired by Bluetooth to your phone for play, pause, and skip tracks, although it doesn't have built-in storage for acting as a dedicated MP3 player. Now, we can also check out some basic weather status at a glance, but the highs and lows for roughly the next week ahead will be displayed, and then just looping back onto that main page. And jumping into the full list of applications, you are able to track some of your sport activities as well, and includes a couple that you can program if you have other favorites and you want to push over from the app. But by default, there's room for about 6, and then start to track your heart rate as well as steps, calories, kind of second per second during the entire session. So things like running, cycling, jump rope, so on and so forth. And then further scrolling down, we have a few additional features, including a timer. Again, the UI is quite simple, but attractive enough and easy enough to operate using the touch targets there. There's also a flashlight mode that will turn the screen white, so it illuminates objects a little bit better in the dark. Alarm clock functionality can also be set from the smartwatch itself, which is good. It will buzz and vibrate whenever an incoming time there is triggered. Stopwatch here as well. In addition to Find My Phone, again, if you're paired by Bluetooth, it will buzz the smartphone that it's connected with. And that is mostly it. Again, nothing that we necessarily haven't seen before, but just packaged in a slightly more elegant presentation, and indeed pretty good from a battery endurance point of view. But for simple step tracking, as well as some of the, again, notifications, in addition to checking out time information, I think it's going to be fine. But if you're expecting it to have as many features as an Android Wear or Apple Watch, of course, it's not going to be a true competitor in that sense. Opening up the Moto Watch application, taking just a couple of seconds there for the data to refresh over, and afterwards you'll be able to track your longer term trends, as well as a bit more of a spacious layout for checking out some of the points in time that we were more active, whether we reached our goal today or not. That being said, and when it comes to analytics and insights, such as turning these into actionable recommendations, well, it's not going to be quite to the same extent as some of the larger players like Fitbit. Even Amazfit, I would say, gives you more metrics and KPIs that you're able to analyze. On here, it's mostly just presenting you with numbers, as you can tell, but at the very least, it's easy enough to interpret, and really the same thing can be said about the blood oxygen monitoring as well. You can turn it on to take automatic measurements throughout the day, so it is 24/7 like heart rate monitoring, but if you're taking a manual measurement, you have to hold still for a couple more seconds. And when it comes to sleep tracking, if we tap here, we can see more of a detailed breakdown for different stages of sleep. But again, it is on the more lightweight side when it comes to deeper insights or recommendations, like you should sleep earlier, wake earlier, how to get more restful sleep. Things like that aren't really explained by their current app. The second tab here allows you to begin an activity session using your phone's connected GPS if you're running outside, for instance, to collect the route info, whereas the final tab allows us to integrate with Google Fit, as well as change our goal settings. In addition, if you tap on the watch itself, you can check out the current battery remaining, and turn on and off features like lift or wake, do not disturb mode, in addition to what types of notifications you want to pass through from your phone, and if you want to turn on and off features like the 24/7 SpO2 monitoring, plus turn on and off alerts for sedentary reminder if you've been sitting for too long, as well as remind you to drink water every X minutes as well. And under Sports Manager, this is where you can add, again, those 6 tiles for tracking on the watch. So you can delete some of the current slots and instead replace them with other more curated sports like table tennis, badminton, other ones which might be a little bit more niche, tai chi, so on and so forth, based on what types of activities you're currently engaging with, and then label them a little bit better. You can also find the watch, and this will let it kind of ring and vibrate if it is nearby. You can also use it as a remote shutter key for taking selfies, for instance, just by using the touchscreen on the watch, then change the units of measurement based on your preferences. And last but not least, under the watch face settings, this is where you can find more options. And to their credit, this is an area where I think they've done a reasonable job. Plenty of styles are represented here, more colorful ones that are digital versus analog options which are a bit more classy. But considering all of these options are free for you to try out, I would say it is a pretty good selection versus many other lower cost watches that I've seen in the past. You can also find a custom watch face here, so you can upload your own photo as the background, as well as change the font color for the time info if you want to create your own. Alright, so that is more or less it as far as our look at the Moto Watch 40, and I would say it's kind of a mixed bag in some regards. For pros, I really like the design that they've used here, as well as the construction quality. It feels really comfortable. The UI also feels pretty consistent with the Moto launcher on Android as well, so if you are a current Motorola smartphone user, it might give you more of a sense of cohesiveness. That being said, features are very lightweight, and although basic metrics aren't bad in terms of accuracy, I would really like them to add 24/7 sleep tracking and potentially upgrading their entire catalog to using AMOLED or OLED screens as we head into 2025, making it even more competitive with other brands. But as long as you're okay with this being more like a fitness tracker, something lightweight, as opposed to being a true cutting-edge smartwatch, then I think it might still be an okay option for what it is if you like the way it looks, and again, you're okay with a more lightweight experience. It's not a bad entry-level fitness tracker, even though it's obviously shy of the once larger ambitions that the Motorola brand carried. You can learn more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been just a closer look at the pretty stylish Motorola Watch 40.